The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the sleepy town of Seguin, Texas. Just beyond its borders lay the infamous Hollering Creek, a place shrouded in legend and dread. The creek's waters shimmered under the fading light, whispering secrets only the wind could carry. The locals spoke of a ghostly woman who haunted the area, her mournful cries echoing through the night. They called her La Llorona, a spirit trapped between worlds, cursed to roam the earth in search of her lost children. No one dared to venture near the creek after dark, but curiosity was a stubborn beast. For Maria, a young journalist desperate for a breakthrough story, the legends were too tantalizing to ignore. Armed with a flashlight, a notebook, and a recorder, she parked her car by the dirt road leading to the creek. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and an eerie stillness settled over the landscape. As she stepped onto the trail, a shiver ran down her spine, though the evening was warm. The stories of the creek played in, her mind like a haunting lullaby, each tale more chilling than the last. Maria's footsteps crunched against the gravel path, each step a defiance against the oppressive silence. She had spent weeks researching the legend of the Hollering Creek, poring over old newspaper clippings, interviewing locals, and scouring library archives. The stories varied in detail but shared a common thread. A woman, betrayed and heartbroken, had drowned her children in the creek before taking her own life. Her spirit, unable to find peace, was said to haunt the waters, her wails a harbinger of doom. Maria had dismissed the tales as folklore, a cultural ghost story meant to keep children in line. Yet as she approached the creek, an unexplainable unease crept over her. The trees seemed to close in, their gnarled branches twisting like skeletal fingers. The flashlight beam wavered in her trembling hand, casting distorted shadows that danced across the underbrush. She paused by the edge of the creek, the water's surface smooth as glass. It reflected the pale moonlight, creating an otherworldly glow. Maria took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She was here to uncover the truth, to separate fact from fiction. But as the first mournful wail pierced the night, she realized she might have underestimated the legend's power. The sound was unlike anything Maria had ever heard. It was a guttural, soul-wrenching cry that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. It rose and fell in waves, a symphony of anguish and despair. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the darkness, her flashlight beam slicing through the shadows. The creek's waters rippled, though there was no breeze. "Is anyone there?" Maria called out, her voice trembling. The only response was the continued wailing, now closer, more insistent. She fumbled for her recorder, pressing the button, with shaking fingers. "This is Maria Torres," she whispered into the device, "standing at the Hollering Creek. I think I just heard something." Her voice sounded small and frightened, even to her own ears. The wailing ceased abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Maria's breath caught as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, her long dark hair cascading over a tattered white gown. Her face was obscured, but her presence radiated an unearthly energy. Maria froze, unable to move or speak. The woman raised her head, revealing hollow, blackened eyes that seemed to pierce Maria's soul. The journalist's instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs felt rooted to the ground. The woman's gaze locked onto Maria, and the air grew colder with each passing second. Frost formed on the grass and trees, and Maria's breath puffed out invisible clouds. The figure stepped closer, her movements unnaturally smooth, as though she glided rather than walked. "Why are you here?" the woman's voice echoed, layered with tones both human and otherworldly. Maria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She clutched her recorder like a lifeline, her fingers digging into the plastic casing. The woman tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You seek the truth?" she asked, her voice laced with bitterness. Maria managed a nod, her heart hammering in her chest. The woman let out a hollow laugh, a sound devoid of joy. "The truth is pain," she whispered. "The truth is death." Before Maria could react, the woman lunged forward, her cold, skeletal hands gripping Maria's wrists. The touch burned like ice, and Maria cried out, dropping the recorder. The device hit the ground with a dull thud, its red light blinking weakly. The woman's grip tightened, and Maria felt as though her very life force was being drained away. Desperation surged within her, and she summoned the strength to pull free. Stumbling backward, she tripped over a root and fell hard onto the ground. Maria scrambled to her feet, her flashlight discarded in the chaos. Darkness enveloped her, and the only light came from the faint glow of the moon. She could hear the woman's laughter, a chilling sound that echoed through the trees. Panic set in as Maria realized she had lost her bearings. The path back to her car was obscured, and the creek seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. She fumbled in her pocket for her phone, but her hands were shaking too badly to unlock it. The woman's voice cut through the darkness. "You cannot escape," she said, her tone calm and menacing. Maria's breath came in ragged gasps as she turned in circles, searching for any sign of an exit. The trees seemed to shift and twist, their branches forming a labyrinth around her. The creek's waters bubbled and churned, as though alive. Maria's mind raced with fragments of the stories she had read. The woman Hollering Creek was said to ensnare those who ventured too close, trapping them in its cursed embrace. Maria had thought herself immune to superstition, but now, faced with the spectral figure and the unnatural phenomena, she wasn't so sure. Summoning every ounce of courage, Maria forced herself to move. She stumbled through the underbrush, her hands outstretched to avoid running into the trees. The ground was uneven, and she nearly fell several times. The woman's laughter followed, her growing louder and more distorted. Maria's mind screamed for her to keep going, to put as much distance as possible between herself and the spirit. But no matter how far she ran, the creek seemed to follow her, its waters always within earshot. Her legs burned with exertion, and her lungs felt like they might burst. She paused to catch her breath, leaning against a tree. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. Maria dared to hope that she had outrun the spirit, but her relief was short-lived. A hand shot out from the darkness, gripping her shoulder. Maria screamed, twisting away, but the hand held firm. She turned to face her assailant and found herself staring into the hollow eyes of the woman. "You cannot run from your fate," the spirit hissed. Maria's scream died in her throat as the woman's face twisted into a grotesque mask of rage. The spirit's grip was unrelenting, and Maria felt herself being dragged toward the creek. She clawed at the ground, her nails breaking against the rocky soil. "Please," she cried, her voice hoarse with terror. "I didn't mean to disturb. You!" The woman's only response was a low, guttural growl. The water's edge loomed closer, and Maria's struggles grew more frantic. She could feel the icy chill emanating from the creek, its dark surface swirling ominously. Desperation gave her strength, and she managed to twist free from the spirit's grasp. Scrambling backward, she grabbed a fallen branch and brandished it like a weapon. "Stay back!" she shouted, her voice trembling. The spirit paused, her head tilting as if in amusement. With a flick of her wrist, the branch was torn from Maria's hands and flung into the water. Maria's heart sank as she realized the futility of her resistance. The spirit stepped closer, her form flickering like a flame. "You cannot fight me," she said, her voice a haunting melody. "You are mine now." Maria's vision blurred with tears as the spirit reached out once more. As the spirit's icy fingers closed around Maria's arm, a sudden light pierced the darkness. It was blinding, pure, and filled with an energy that seemed to repel the spirit. The woman shrieked, releasing Maria and retreating into the shadows. Maria shielded her eyes, trying to make sense of what was happening. The light grew brighter, and a figure emerged from its center. It was an elderly woman, her face lined with wisdom and kindness. She held a staff carved with intricate symbols, and her presence radiated warmth. "Begone, spirit," the woman commanded, her voice firm and authoritative. The spirit hissed, her form flickering like a dying flame. "You have no power here," she spat. The elderly woman raised her staff, and the symbols began to glow. "I banish you back to the depths," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. The spirit let out a final, ear-piercing wail before dissolving into the night. The creek's waters stilled, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Maria collapsed to the ground, her body trembling with relief and exhaustion. The elderly woman knelt beside Maria, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you hurt?" she asked gently. Maria shook her head, unable to find her voice. The woman helped her to her feet, supporting her as they made their way back to the trail. "You were lucky I heard your cries," the woman said. "The spirit of the creek is not one to be trifled with." Maria managed a weak smile, her gratitude overshadowed by lingering fear. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman nodded, her expression grave. "The legend of the woman Hollering Creek is not just a story," she said. "It is a warning. Many have lost their lives to her wrath. You must share what you've experienced, so others will heed the warning." Maria nodded, her mind already racing with how she would write her article. The elderly woman's presence was a comfort, but Maria couldn't shake the feeling that the spirit's eyes were still watching her from the shadows. As they reached the safety of the road, Maria turned to thank the woman once more, but she was gone. The staff, the light, and the warmth had vanished as if they had never been there. Maria stared at the empty space, her mind struggling to comprehend what had happened. She climbed into her car, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she tried to steady her nerves. The events of the night replayed in her mind, each detail more surreal than the last. She glanced at her recorder, which lay on the passenger seat. The red light was still blinking, a small beacon of hope that her ordeal had been captured. Maria drove back to town in silence, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear, gratitude, and determination. She knew her story would be met with skepticism, but she didn't care. She had faced the spirit of the woman Hollering Creek and lived to tell the tale. As she parked in front of her apartment, Maria made a silent vow. She would honor the warning and share her experience, ensuring that the legend of the creek would never be forgotten. But deep down, she knew the spirit was still out there, waiting for the next soul brave enough or foolish enough to venture too close.